Hello, friends. This week in Acts, we read about the conversion of a sexually mutilated Ethiopian, the conversion of Saul, who was a former persecutor of Jesus and his church, Saul's escape through an opening in the wall in Damascus, his attempt to join the disciples in Jerusalem, and two healings by Peter, one of a paralyzed man and the other, the resurrection of a dead woman named Dorcas, in the town of Lydda. Let's start with the healing stories. Two things are noteworthy here. First, by the power of God, Peter is doing just exactly what Jesus did when he walked the earth, healing the paralyzed and raising the dead to life. By the way, the latter healing, the resurrection of Dorcas, reminds us of similar healings of two of the great prophets in the Old Testament, right? Elijah and Elisha. These miracles that Peter performs by God's power are signs that Peter is in fact God's prophet who continues the work of Jesus. But the second thing that I find noteworthy here is that, and perhaps it's more important to Luke's story, that these healings draw Peter away from Jerusalem to the coastal city of Joppa, and thereby closer to the wider world of the Gentiles, to which, by the way, Peter is headed in chapter 10. Luke wants to show us how the gospel advanced to include Gentile converts, and that with God's blessing. Now, let's talk about Saul. Is there a more stunning transformation in all of history than the conversion of Saul, from persecutor to apostle and missionary? Surely, his conversion is a sure sign that the crucified Messiah is indeed the Lord, and that Jesus was indeed raised from the dead, and that this burgeoning movement called Christianity was from God. I don't think there is a better explanation for the conversion of Saul than the fact that Jesus was raised from the dead and that God is behind this movement. You see what I'm saying? In other words, the conversion of Saul is pretty good proof that Jesus was raised from the dead, for I don't know that anything else would have changed him from persecutor of the church to missionary and apostle. Anyway, once Saul learns that Jesus is alive, he is baptized, and since Jesus is alive and identifies himself with this new community of Christ followers, Saul himself joins this new community. This surely is a sign of obedience to Jesus and his presence. Well, Saul then tries to join the community of Christ followers. He tries to join that community. Those in Jerusalem were hesitant to welcome him, just as Ananias was hesitant to go to him when God told him to go to him and tell him about the mission he had for him and that he would have to suffer for the name of Christ. Actually, those disciples in Jerusalem and Ananias, they were all afraid of Saul, and for good reason, right? I mean, he was the church's enemy number one before his conversion. But with the help of Barnabas, the son of consolation, the son of encouragement, Saul was introduced to the church and to the apostles in Jerusalem, and eventually he received their endorsement. From chapter 9, Peter will fill an important role, and so will Paul, won't he? But these two apostles are not the major characters in Acts. They were important, sure, but they were not Luke's main characters. So who then is the main character? Well, you know, of course, that is God. God is the main character in this story. Consider this. Saul's turnaround, stunning as it was caused by God, wasn't it? His change was caused by the direct intervention of Jesus. The text tells us that a light from heaven flashed around Saul, and he fell to the ground, and then he heard a voice, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" He replies, "Who are you, Lord?" "I am Jesus whom you are persecuting." Jesus is still in this narrative. He's alive. He's a character in the story. And his direct intervention in Saul's life brought about the most stunning turnaround in history. And Peter? Well, we will soon read of the visions that God sent to Peter and to Cornelius that brought the gospel into the Gentile world, the world of the Gentiles. So yes, God is the one behind all of these stories who moves these characters where he wants them. He's the major character of Luke's story. And what does Luke want to show? He wants to show that it was God's idea from day one to include Gentiles in his family. And he wants to show that what is happening in Acts is that God is showing himself faithful to his promises. Folks, I'll close on this note. God has always and will always keep his promises. Count on it. And God has been at work in his world. He has not walked away from it. No, not in any way. He is at work today, and we have the privilege of joining him in his work to take the message of Jesus to every neighborhood, city, and nation on this earth. What an exciting adventure we Christians are a part of.